Whenever I make a new Discord profile, I've had a lot of them. I've had a lot of Discord profiles over time, mostly just because I don't like keeping track of all of the old messages I have. I don't like the fact that I know Discord's going to have the information. I tend to just delete the accounts that I have. Almost always delete the accounts that I have. I wouldn't even use Discord if I had the power to get all of my friends on a different platform. I wouldn't have to. Um, I don't like the fact that I use Windows either, but I have to use Windows because Sony Vegas is on there. Like, if I could just make Sony Vegas work on like Mint, or even fucking Ubuntu. Like Ubuntu is owned by Amazon, so it's still not very good, but it's better than Windows. Ubuntu's gonna have some adware on it because of course it does, but it's not Windows. I want to get rid of Windows. I want to get rid of Discord, but I can't. It's just the thing that everybody is on. There's no like alternative messaging service that I could just use. I hate the fact that I have to use the phone to call people because I know they're recording the conversations. I know that that's going to be something that they have on tape. Somebody somewhere. No, they're not going to do anything with it, but I hate that that exists. I hate that that happens. I feel like my ideal life or experience would be one in which all of the software that I'm using is protected and my place on the internet is protected. I would be living in a stable country where I know personal freedoms are going to be guaranteed to me. But I think throughout the world, no matter where you are, unless you're in a country that's horribly poor, where they don't have the energy and the resources to spy on you and to care about what it is that you're doing, you're basically shit out of luck. Like, there's not really anything that you can do to prevent being spied on. So it sucks because of that. There's only so much that you can do because when platforms have a centralized grip on power, everyone's going to be on them because everyone knows about those platforms. And as a result of that, it's just going to be the easiest thing to use because everyone is already on them. Now, a couple important people to you get on this new thing because they don't care, and then eventually they tell their friends, and then all of their friends get on the thing. Now, Discord was kind of like this cool Skype when it first came out, because I've never liked Skype myself, but we would always say that Skype was like this corporate machine that was going to censor you and steal your data and stuff, which was true. So Discord was like Skype for cool people. It was the Skype that was supposed to be new and innovative and protected you. But over time, as does any company that gets larger and has more shareholders and needs to make money in order to survive, it becomes coercive and corrupt, and there are going to be obvious scandals that happen as a result of a company having a larger grip and larger centralization of power. Um, and so um, it sucks. No, it sucks that things are this way, but it's just kind of the platform that I have to use. But as a result of that, like every couple of months, I always just delete my Discord, so the messages that I post just aren't linked back to me. I know they are linked back to me, but it's one of those things where I try to preserve, excuse me, I try not to preserve the past that I had as if that's going to do anything. It really doesn't do anything. It's just a habit that I have that I feel like I should probably stop. Um, but I've always done this is that with a lot of these platforms in particular, I've been the type of guy who wants to cover my own tracks and to keep it from people finding old stuff that I did or just having a link on the internet. I used to read these ginormous guides on how to completely erase your footprint on the internet. Um, One of the big warnings it gave was, never use Facebook and these types of things. And I was like, well, fuck, I already did that. Of course, I deleted my Facebook years ago, but the remnants of it are there. I would go on a Rizu-chan, place like this, and I would find these gigantic guides on how to be as private on the internet as possible. And, I would get into like all of these different VPNs, learning how they worked. I was really into Bitcoin at the time, trying to learn how to purchase VPNs over Tor with Bitcoin so your ISP didn't know that you were going to be doing that. I tried to get into like the idea of leaving footprints on the surface web so that way, like, you do all of your important stuff with Tor and with a VPN on, peer block and all this other stuff, and then you leave normal footprints by using, something like Firefox, um, totally disconnected from the web. I was, or not disconnected from the disconnected web. I was really into Tails. I thought Tails Linux was so cool. I wanted to know everything about Tails, how it functioned. Um, I was really into learning about Linux in general for a while, just because it is the best option. It is the best option if you want good security. Um, I want to put Arch on my computer. That's the thing. The problem is that Arch has a lot of complications. They say Arch is going to take a few hours to put on the computer. Really, it takes a few days because it never goes right. There's always going to be more complications with Arch. And I don't want to deal with that necessarily. And plus, Sony Vegas, it's the life and blood of this channel, is that without Sony Vegas, the videos don't get edited. I could use an editor on Linux, but I've tried that before, and I've never really liked any of them that much. Um, so I'd have to get it working with Wine, which is possible. It's just a pain in the ass, because there's a lot of different things you have to do to get it to work on Wine. But it is possible. The thing with people complaining about Linux is that they tend to say it takes too much effort to get certain things to work, which, with a very limited number of things, that is true. But with the vast majority of things, like Wine isn't super complicated to use, especially like if you're talking about video games, like Proton on Steam is totally simple. It's just built into the app of Steam that you get Proton to work, and then it just runs the games through Wine, and they can do fine. Something like Lutris centralizes that even more. Like, it's not that difficult to get a lot of Windows applications to work fine on Linux, and Linux is just the better operating system. It maximizes the resources of your computer better. It makes, like I said, just makes it go faster. No, my really old Windows XP computer, I tried running Windows 7 on that, which really weren't supposed to do, and it would make the entire thing go slow as fuck. It was terrible trying to render videos on that computer, but I had to do it anyway. It would spend like 24 hours rendering one video in a shitty quality, but that's what I had to do at the time to make videos. And as soon as I put Lubuntu on it, the lightweight version of Ubuntu, as soon as I put that on the computer ran 10 times better. It went fine. So much so that with the limited resources and capabilities that the computer had, it was able to produce an HD signal and run completely fine. Now, the capability was always within the computer. The problem is that it wasn't necessarily able to come out because the resources were not optimized properly. Whereas with Lubuntu, because the updates continued coming out and it continued getting better and better and better at optimizing resources, it was able to produce a better video signal with older hardware, and the old hardware was working fine. Whereas, even with XP, like, there were a lot of problems. And so, it's just better. It's better at using the resources of your computer to do what you want. And that's the power of open source. That's what I really, really love about open source, is that, you can keep your privacy, there are in-depth ways that you can keep your privacy online as much as possible, which, as AI gets more advanced and as our government continues to crack down on freedom of speech, as we're seeing right now with the imprisonment of journalists in the United States, it's really, really important because that democracy isn't always going to be there. You look at something like COINTELPRO in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and so forth. And you had assassinations of people organizing workers in the country, lying in their bed, just shooting them to death. You had the major crackdown on filmmakers, that the government would organize purges of filmmakers in the film industry, not even for being communist, but just for having more left-wing ideas that who were suspected of being communist. They took them out. You had teachers, tons and tons of teachers who were purged in schools and in colleges just for having a different political belief. They weren't able to express their freedom of speech in any form or to even have a thought because they would lose their job. You had something like, what was it called? Operation Mockingbird, which was literally the CIA doing everything they possibly could to coerce and control the media, to where the media in the United States would say what the government wanted them to. And even to this day, you have former members of the FBI going on Fox News and talking about how one of the main goals that he had in his department in the FBI was to try and keep fucking moderate centrists like AOC out of power. And this was someone who worked in the FBI after, literally after they had said they would stop suppressing political opponents. So it goes on to this day. It still happens. And what with the massive surveillance that you have with the NSA that the police state is using to continually crack down on people, I think now more than ever, it's important to get into open source. It's important to get into alternatives to Discord that are decentralized, that aren't going to be connected to one big company, but use things like peer-to-peer. I know those things are out there. I can't remember the name of specific platforms off the top of my head, but I know they exist. And I think peer-to-peer is one really good way to start combating this. We need to start using things like BitChute instead of YouTube, because it's like I said in my Monopoly and Culture War video, is that YouTube may be a private company that's allowed to get rid of any speech on their platform that they please. I acknowledge that. It's also a monopoly on information. And so when you have these ultra large corporations and billionaires having a monopoly on the print and the news media in the realm of television, you're going to have to go to YouTube for alternative sources. And the problem with that is that if YouTube is the only place to go for alternative video news, then that platform can now crack down on dissenting voices in the same way that, you have to be part of these billionaire firms in order to have your own news channel and to be able to say things. But, if you say something that the news doesn't like, or the people who own the news doesn't like, you're going to get fired. The same way Ed Schultz did on MSNBC for just covering Bernie Sanders. He got fired. So there's many, many examples of this throughout history. You go back to 2003, 2004, you had people on MSNBC getting fired just for covering the Iraq War in a negative light. And the reason why is that the people who own these companies, as Chomsky talks about in his book Manufacturing Consent, are ultimately also going to be the lobbyists who control the government. And when you have these lobbyists controlling the media and the government, the media will do the bidding of the government, which is doing the bidding of those lobbyists. And that's what they're doing. We have the illusion of freedom, we have the illusion of rights, but really we don't. And when I see something like YouTube having a monopoly on video platforms, yeah, of course you can quote unquote go out and build your own platform, but is it going to succeed? No, probably not, because everyone goes to YouTube. YouTube has more advertising power. They have more money, and money is a form of power. And they exercise so much of that power that they can have a monopoly over the internet. And if someone ends up having a successful video platform that has enough dissenting voices that end up being a big enough threat to the hegemonic entities in this country, you know what they do? They tell PayPal to stop sending you money. They say, yeah, destroy their PayPal account. They did that with 4chan. They did that with 8chan. They're doing that with 8chan right now. Patreon and PayPal say, no, we're not going to allow you to fund your site like this. You're going to have to find another way. Well, you can turn to the banks, but the banks can say, no, we're not going to fund your project this way. And so what do you do at that point? At that point, the market isn't so free anymore because you're being shackled by these big companies. You have to, you have to work at the whims of these companies because now what they want is what matters, and their interests tend to be pretty common. They tend to want pretty similar things in the sense that all of them may have differing political views, but the one thing that they'll agree on is that those dissenting voices that want to get them out of power are a bad thing, and they need to be stopped. There are very few principled individuals when push comes to shove. There are very few principled individuals when they know their grip on power is truly being challenged by action instead of by ideas. And so, when the economic crash happens, the next economic crash, which is going to be happening pretty soon, and when turmoil really starts getting to levels that we haven't seen in quite some time, and there emerges a new threat to the hegemony of the current financial institutions and media institutions in this country and the current government. We're going to see some overt and not so overt crackdowns on freedom of speech, and most likely even more surveillance of people like you and me. That's why I think it's incredibly, incredibly important to try and innovate to create new ways around this, to create new ways that we don't have to be controlled by these ginormous corporations when in many ways there isn't a way around it. In many ways there isn't very much that we can do because they have a shackle. They have a shackle on our society and how we think. They control the very structures of how this country functions and how many other functions. Um, and so add me on Discord. That was the point of this video. This video was meant to be an announcement video saying that my Discord was public again, so you could add me. But it ended up just being a rant in which I sound like a conspiracy theorist.